starting up.
We'll call this meeting to order. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for being here, spending extra time here, and everything that's the town of Fletcher. I think it goes without saying, we're all agree. Without you all, there is no town of Fletcher. You all keep the world spinning here, so thank you. For the second time, let's go ahead and hop into it. First on the agenda, we have Mr. Horton, IT, one server. So, you want to take the podium and tell us a little bit about what you got?
All right, looks like we're already on here. Sheila, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
She meant sir.
It,
It's Matthew.
Sorry about that.
yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We'll chalk it up to lag.
Don't feel bad. I've been called yes, man.
All right. Well,
Sorry about that.
That's right.
it's okay. So for IT this year, we had, I believe, 5 decision packages. 4 of those packages were approved. Of those 4 approved, we've completed implementation of 2 of them. We have completed getting quoted and signed off on 1, and we're still awaiting a quote for the 4th one. So we've done a major backup system upgrade and a major upgrade of the firewalls to drive all of the internet and services in the building. We have gotten the proposal and signed off on the proposal for the media system upgrade for this room that will add the video YouTube recording capability that you requested. The thing that we're waiting on is the camera system upgrades for both Town Hall and the park. I had the vendor for that out here to scope it in early December. I have not received a proposal back from him yet. They're typically pretty slow. So I actually sent a follow-up email earlier today seeing where that is. They're aware of the deadline that we would want to have everything paid for and implemented by July 1st of this year. And he's also aware of the cost constraints of the project. So hopefully they'll be able to get rolling on that pretty soon. As far as other stuff, we completed a major upgrade of the core accounting slash tax system, MAZE, earlier this year. It's always a pain. Hopefully it'll last us for a little while longer. If you guys aren't aware, that software is created by a company out of Canada, and never seen it implemented anywhere else in any of the other municipalities that we've worked with. It's my understanding that it's maintained by just a couple of developers, and we've had it in place since I've started working here in 2007, so I believe it's been in somewhat forever, but I think what will ultimately dictate whether or not you ever move off that thing is the life span of the developers. There's only a couple, and I don't know if they'll ever be able to bring in people who know that particular system because it is pretty wild. So I know we've looked into alternatives in the past, but it's working for the time being, so we'll continue to cruise with it until we can't any longer, I suppose. As far as what we're looking at for next year, I expect some cost increases for our email services. Microsoft is raising costs in general for the per mailbox price, but we're also going to want to implement some additional licensing for that. That will result in a cost increase. And what that will do for us is allow us to enable some additional security features that we're not currently licensed for with regards to conditional access. So we'll be able to control, whether or not people are able to log into their mailbox from outside this general area, or if they can log in from anywhere. Right now, we have no control over that. That's a separately licensed feature that we have to pay extra for. But that's something I think is important, and we're going to want to implement coming forward, especially as the level of email attacks and whatnot continues to get more and more complex as the years go by. Other than that, don't really have much to say. Servers are looking good. We replace a slew of desktops every year, cycling the oldest ones out, so we'll be continuing to do that as part of our yearly replacements of equipment. Just as a kind of an administrative thing, Mark and Heather are aware of this, but this year, both myself and Brian, you may not have met him, but he's another engineer at one who serves. We actually bought the company from the existing owners, so we're the owners now. really change anything with our relationship with the town. The costs and whatnot, as far as our services, are not going to be changing in next year, as far as we know. But that's one indication that, I'm not going anywhere. I'm kind of stuck here now. So, that's about it, unless you guys have any questions.
Congratulations on your business venture.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions from council? How's the email security? Can you explain that again, the email security thing? Was I hearing correctly that you log in, I guess, from?
Yeah, the way it works now is we have no way to restrict where you can log in from. So somebody could say be over in Afghanistan or something and trying to log into Microsoft servers, which is where our email is hosted. The additional licensing basically gives us the ability to narrow it down to a general geographic area. So we will probably limit it to Western North Carolina only, unless we're aware that somebody's taking a trip and is going to need access to email when they're away. A lot of it's getting interesting because a lot of the attackers are smart enough to know that a lot of people have that limitation in place now. So even if they're not physically located within the United States, they'll VPN to a machine within the U.S. that they control and launch their attack from there. We've seen some clients in the area get attacked from like Arizona and whatnot, even though they've had no employees traveling in that area. So limiting it to just Western North Carolina is probably the best we can do there, but it's one more thing that we can put in place to kind of keep things safe, because the last thing we would want is a malicious actor to gain control of somebody's mailbox and be able to monitor the email and potentially intercept communications.
That sounds important to me.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I had a quick question. You said something about rotate your computers every so often. What's your time frame on a computer? I'm just kind of curious.
We get about 4 to 5 years out of a desktop now. That's basically just dictated by the warranty length. It costs less to replace them than it is to extend the warranty past the default warranty period. Desktops don't cost a lot nowadays. It's about $500 per endpoint, and we don't typically replace the monitors, so we're just replacing the endpoints themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we thank you, Mr. Boyd.
All right, thanks, guys.
And next up, we have Madam Assistant Town Manager of Admin.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So I have some of the smaller, not as busy, active departments to speak about today. So the first one's administration, and that is mostly salary and benefits for admin staff, the finance staff, and town clerk. So don't expect any major changes in that department. Professional services, so that is our accounting, legal fees, out-of-country transit, any other professional services that we need to do. The only thing that'll be changing for next fiscal year will be adding the election costs, because that is budgeted there, so we'll have an election in the fall. So that's only really changed there. In town facilities, I call that my catch-all department. It has postage, it has newsletter expenses, it has our wellness for our employees, it has utilities. It's kind of just a hodgepodge of different line items. And again, just minor like increases with utilities. I don't foresee that department going up much higher either. So these are pretty easy ones. These are all the big hitters back here. So unless you have any questions for me.
So the election cost, is any of that offset by us letting them use the place?
And I know we spoke to them before, and I think it's a cost that they set to be able to hold the election. And it's set by their board. So last time we spoke, we speak out, reach out to them again. So I'll put that on my list. And I think we get charged per ballot too. We get like an overall fee, and then each ballot we get charged for.
It's not offset
Yeah.
at this time, it's not.
So it depends on turnout as well.
So I usually get a budget number, and like one year it came in much higher than we had more turnout, which is a good thing. So I'll come up with a number and plug it in. So sorry, I'm not very exciting.
Okay. Well, yeah, it seems like turnout's been increasing over the years.
Yes. Anybody have any other questions?
Looks like it.
Okay.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Next up, we got Mr. Parson, Mr. Walker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before I start talking about expenses, I wanted to talk a little about impact of our department. Parks and Rec is probably the largest provider of health and wellness impacting the Fletcher community. We also help connect people through social connections, the leader in conservation and environment in our community, a place where people can find green space and peace. And then also we're a point of social equity. Parks are made for everyone. So we feel like that what we do really makes a tremendous benefit to the community. And this past year was a big growth year for us. Our last 3 events, the Family Festival, Halloween Carnival, and Christmas event, all drew over 2,000 plus people. Our summer day camp sold out in 2 days of registration, 121 children in camp. We were booked 55 campers all week long. We had close to 500 kids involved in our youth sports connections with Fletcher Youth Baseball and Empire Lacrosse. Our summer family entertainment series, concerts in the park and movie in the park, those 3 events drew almost 900 people in attendance. Our annual Easter egg hunt, we had over 500 children looking for the 10,000 eggs, and they found them pretty quick. We've tried to figure out how to slow that event down, but there's not a good way to do it. Father-daughter dance is one of our most popular events. It'll be coming up in February. It sold out again last year. We've been fortunate this year. Optimum, which is previously Morse Broadband, is back for their 14th year as a sponsor of that event. So we're looking forward to doing that. And ticket sales go on sale January 16th. So if you've got a daughter that wants to attend that event, circle that date, January 16th.
Are they still doing 2?
We're going to do 1 this year because we've moved the event to Prescott Auto Event Center. They've got a huge event center, so we're going to be able to go from 150 people up to 200, and we're going to do 1 evening dance, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So we're really excited about that. So talking about expenses, when we look at programs and activities, we know across the board there's going to be about a 7% increase on supply items for our bigger programs, summer day camp, some of our event pieces. So you will see that when we submit our budget, that ticket increase. The 4 items that we've kind of identified within our department that are pieces that are going to be expenditures to look at going forward in the new year is we've got an older mower, one of our large 72-inch mowers. We need to replace that. That's about a $16,000 item currently. We'll be getting bids on that and getting price quotes in. We've got a golf cart we need to replace desperately. 2 years ago, we got money allocated, but with the price increases on everything, there wasn't enough funding to make that happen, so we looked at what that is. We think $14,000 now in the current market is what would improve and get us a golf cart that the Rangers can use, that we use for trash and supply and things like that. One of our cameras, our main drive camera, we really need to consider moving it to a wireless connection. It's had multiple issues around water in the lines, underground. We've had the company out a few times to replace it, and that's their recommendation at this point. They've just rebooted it and elevated that above ground. But long term, that's probably a $6,000 expenditure to get that. All our other cameras on the rear of the parking lot are wireless, and we have very little impact issues with that around weather. And then we're looking and debating around the value and the need of an AED unit within the park. The challenge is I've reached out to all the parks in Western North Carolina. No one has one just placed in the park. It's in a facility. We could place one in the concession stand, but from a day-to-day use piece, that's kind of problematic. So I'm just trying to reach around the state to see if there's someone that's been successful in putting the AED mounted in the park on a wall somewhere that hasn't dealt with vandalism. Because it's an expensive item to have out there. But it's something, as our day-to-day population is growing to 1,500 a day, and we're getting more seniors in and out of the facility. And as much as we do youth sports, it's just something we might want to take a hard look at this year.
Is there any chance they come up with some kind of lockbox that the person, when they call 911, the person out the other end has whatever code it takes?
Yeah, that could be an option, is we put it in a combination lock piece mounted, and we just have that available so that dispatch, whoever they contact, if they can't, if our staff aren't there, they could at least get that access to them. So that could be an option.
It's definitely needed.
Any other questions?
You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Appreciate
We
it.
have a pretty big identity for Parks and Rec and Fletcher, so we appreciate you.
I'm just curious, with Greg's still up there, if y'all had any feedback. We transitioned at the past Halloween carnival. We had the trick or treat trail, and we went back to having Halloween carnival, and I don't know if there's any feedback from, that y'all observed or from the public about it.
This
Okay,
year.
okay.
Yeah, from a staffing perspective, we had a large turnout, plus 2,000, but it was kind of congested on Field 5. So we've kind of actually been kicking around the concept of still bringing the carnival activities to the stations, but moving the stations around that inner walkway, because we were having 45 kids to 50 kids waiting in line. Still have it as an open event, but have it as a movable carnival around the activity area, just so, because at one point we looked around and there wasn't a lot of grass capability to move. So that's one of the things that we were just trying to make it more functional, because we had some parents that they spent like most of the event in 2 lines. So if we've got people moving and moving on, that might eliminate that. And we can still do the carnival games at each station.
Well, I think that was my only comment, because that was my first time at the carnival, but I have been at the trail before, and we still had, I guess, the same sponsors or vendors, whatever you call them, but people kept on moving around the track and the field, so I thought that made a lot of sense and was efficient.
In terms of Christmas decorations, did we add much to the park this year?
Not this year, Mr. David. We did not secure, because we had the ice rink coming in and we weren't sure cost-wise everything entailing with that, because we did have to rent a piece of equipment to move all of that over. So we didn't really spend any of our allocation for digital lighting. We'll take a look at that and going into next year, see how we can enhance that. We would like to maybe put some lights and things around the ice rink, because part of our plan next year is to have a couple of nights of ice rink on top of the Saturday event.
I'd like to see us every year try to improve it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, part of the challenge is we've got a little bit of power limitations with power excess at Field 5 and coming off of concession stand and power access at Field 4. So it may be upticking those 2 boxes long-term to add more power connectivity.
That might be something we want to add on our project for the pickleball courts, because they're right there at it, to upgrade the power grid and tap into it there.
We haven't heard that there's any problem. Well, we don't have lights on it, so there's really not going to be much
There may not be
power
a
requirement for power out there. But we hadn't had a challenge before with power out there, other than it takes a distance to get connected when you get out like Field 5.
Well, it helps dramatically when everybody started switching to the LED Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Put so much more for a little power draw.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Chief, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good afternoon to you. Real quickly, I'll hit on some of the objectives and goals that we had for the present fiscal year that we're in. Last time we met, recruiting, obviously that's ongoing. We discussed recruiting several times. I believe the last time we talked about it, on paper we were 6 people short, 6 officers short. Presently on paper, we're 3 officers short, so there has been some improvement. The additional 3 officers we do have, though, are still in training. So in reality, we're still working 6 short, but we're a lot closer than what we once were. So we have 2 people that are in field training at this moment and graduated the basic law enforcement training academy. And then we have 1 that just started the academy today. So those make up those 3, and then we will remain 3 short. So obviously recruitment is going to be an ongoing effort presently and into the next fiscal year. I will tell you and report that in calendar year 2022, we had 26 applications for police officer positions. Of those 26 applications, we hired 7. One of those individuals did not make it through his training, and so we had to send him away. 3 of them are on the street and doing very well at the moment, and those other 3 are in training that I've already spoken about. So if we look at that, out of all the people that apply at the police department, less than a quarter of them get hired. And so I think that is a good thing. We're very picky about who we take. We want to make sure they're going to fit the Fletcher culture and that they're very serviceful and community oriented. And so we really kind of vet them very well. So I do think that is a good thing, but we are getting some attention as well. We have 26 applications, so I think that's positive. So that'll continue in the upcoming fiscal year as well. Another objective was increasing community engagement, and we've tried to increase that by adding some additional engagement opportunities. They have not been well attended in the community. We've done some coffee with the cop, meet the chief, events like that, some crime prevention presentations, and we've gotten a very low turnout for that. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. People might just be content and happy with the services they get, and why do they want to ruin their Saturday to go out and listen to me talk, you know? So typically when people are not happy and they're disgruntled and they're frustrated, they show up. And so the fact that we're having low turnouts, I'm still very optimistic about that. And so I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. But we are standing by, and we're ready to step up, and we're ready to meet whatever needs the community has regarding community engagement, if and when they're ready. But we have tried again to increase some things, and just haven't really got good response from the community. We are trying to be involved at more park events, as many as we can. Of course, recruitment and staffing is certainly involved in that. We're presently in the middle of trying to get a Polaris side-by-side through a grant. And so we're working on doing that, hoping that will make it a little easier to move about the park, hit the trails, be seen in other places. Right now we have a golf cart that's not functioning. It doesn't work, and it doesn't really look the best, so we need something a little more fancy to make our officers look better out there. That is, we're working on that, and again, that would be, if it goes through, that would be funded by a grant. Another objective was this lethality assessment program we were working with through Safe Light, and that is basically when we respond to domestic violence type cases. We assess those situations a little differently, and if they reach a certain level in our assessment, reach a certain score, then we would reach out to Safe Light immediately, day or night. We would call them and try to get the victim services. And that is rolling out, but that's been rolling out slowly, and it's not any fault of ours. We've met several times with Safe Light. We've actually sent our trainers out to be trained, but it's actually a Maryland program out of the state of Maryland, and they're trying to update it. So they've kind of put the brakes on it. Everything's slowed down waiting for those updates. The last time we met, we decided we would, with Safe Light, we decided we would probably continue to roll it out anyways and use the old model until the new model comes out. But that's why we really haven't completed that yet, but it's in progress. We continue to look for opportunities to provide additional training, education to our officers who are pretty much prepared for whatever comes their way. That course will continue in the upcoming fiscal year. We've been overhauling our policy and procedures. I was hoping to have all that completed by the end of calendar year 2022. I got a little more work to do on that. We have written 78 policies in the last year plus, and I have about 9 more policies to go. So we're very close to having that done and over with. I have a few more policies we need to knock out. And then we are in the middle of an evidence room inventory. Obviously, your evidence room is always a high-risk category. It needs to be in good shape. It can cause you lots of problems if it isn't. So we have been presently going through that inventory, and we're continuing with that. That should be completed by the beginning of the next fiscal year. I would hope to have that completed by the end of February. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move into the upcoming fiscal year. Some requests that you can expect probably from the police department side of things. So all those items, all those objectives we're presently working on, we'll continue to work on those. What new request, which I'm sure will be no surprise to anybody, we've discussed this several times already, is the body-worn camera. That's the equipment we presently use with our in-car cameras is outdated. We're having to fix a lot of stuff. There's usually a large turnaround time in getting things fixed because our equipment's quite old. And just yesterday we had what I would call a sensitive incident, and I came in today and it would have been nice to look at the footage immediately and see what we were dealing with. And the footage should be there, but it didn't automatically download like it should have. So that was the night shift. Now the night shift went into the days off, so when they come back on Wednesday, we're going to have to manually download it. And again, the footage should be there. We should eventually get to look at it. But from my standpoint, it would have been nice if I could have come in the door and looked at it immediately. And I tried to find that it wasn't there, and again, it just goes back to outdated equipment. So we've been talking about the body-worn cameras, looking at the dollars and cents of that. We've already been receiving proposals on that. And at the low end, we have $162,000. At the high end, at this moment, is $235,000. Now, the $162,000 gives us all new body-worn cameras. We don't have body-worn cameras at the moment. And then it upgrades the in-car cameras. Based upon what we're dealing with the quality of our in-car cameras, I'm not a big fan of that. I'd rather get everything brand new so we don't have to have reoccurring problems. And of course, we'd have to stay with the same provider if we did that upgrade proposal as well. All the companies we've looked at presently, we'll break it down to 5 years, so you don't have to pay that lump sum in one shot. So if you did the 5-year, the first year is a little bit more for all the companies. First year would be about $46,000 to $50,000, and then year 2 through 5 would be $39,000 to $45,000. And that would be, if you went the high end, that would be all new equipment.
That's the car cameras?
That would be everything, car cameras and body worn cameras. So they would outfit the cars with new cameras, and then new microphones, and then you'd have the body camera that goes with you when you leave the car.
So is it like, if I recall, in past years, I think a comment was made that they're packaged together essentially, like the body worn cameras and the dash cameras. Is that accurate or am I misremembering?
No, yeah, the microphone will talk to the in-car camera.
No, I mean, is it like a package deal, like you're getting the body worn cameras plus
Yes.
the dash cameras?
Yes.
Is there like some kind of discount there? Is that?
Well, that's kind of really, I mean, I think that's the industry today. I don't know how much of a discount you're getting. The only discount that I've seen so far is if we stay with the same company and we just upgrade and don't get all new equipment for the in-car camera. That's cost savings there. So they'll fix some stuff, they'll give us some new equipment, but some of the equipment won't be new. Of course, all the body cameras will be new, they don't have them at all. So that would be the cheapest route, we have to stay with the present company. But most of these proposals we're getting is everything brand new, in-car cameras.
Yeah,
plus the body worn camera. Oh, yeah, you definitely, there's a purpose for both of them. The body camera, obviously, you can go away from the car in people's homes, and you can hear what's going on, you got the recordings. But yet, at the in-car camera, if something was to happen outside of the car, and you're wrestling with somebody, that body camera is going to be getting the sky, the ground, and it's not going to pick up a lot of stuff, or that car camera will be seeing everything. So you definitely want to have both of those. We are looking into grants as well. There are a lot of grants out there in body cameras. Some of the grants I've seen are specific to a certain manufacturer of body cameras, and not necessarily the manufacturer I'm familiar with, so that's a little scary. But then you have, like the Department of Justice has grants for body cameras. There'll probably be a lot more red tape attached to those. But there are grants out there that we're exploring. Most of those grants, as far as I understand, is you still have to fund the project, and then they reimburse you. It's kind of the way that works. But we are certainly wanting to be responsible of the town's funds and the residents' tax payments. So we are looking at the grants to try to, fund as much of that as we can through that. So,
How much problem do you expect to have getting the officers to turn the cameras on when they're supposed to?
I don't think that's good. I think most of the officers want the cameras. We've had several recent incidents come up where they don't have recordings. So stuff freezes, like the recording will start and it just freezes. And, no, that's very frustrating to them. They're out there trying to do their job, do it well. I don't think they're worried about that at all. I think they'll be very supportive of having those cameras.
They'll like it as a defensive issue.
Pardon me?
They'll like it as a defensive.
Yeah, and it demonstrates when things go bad, it demonstrates they're doing the right stuff. So no, I don't think we're going to have any problems there. And right now, and I've mentioned this before, I randomly check videos for accountability purposes to make sure they are being used when they're supposed to. And it's getting very difficult. I know just a little more than a year ago, I was telling us we shouldn't be getting body cameras. But it's getting very frustrating and difficult because the equipment messes up so often. You're like, all right, is it an equipment failure or is it an officer failure? And certainly you don't want to condemn or discipline an officer when it's an equipment failure. So that puts me and the Captain Gutierrez in a tough spot too, trying to make sure they're using the equipment. And most of the time I'm finding it's an equipment failure. And it works most of the time, but we're having to. We just got a bunch of new mics last week. Actually, we got 5 or 6 new mics they had to send us. But while we're waiting for them to send them, we don't have audio for 2 weeks until we get them. And as we all know, we've seen things can happen in an hour from now, so we need to have equipment that works.
So what about the storage component of storing the active videos? Does that impact the IT budget? How long?
I'm not really, that's a very good question. I wasn't really thinking of the IT budget at all. Presently, the good stuff out there is cloud-based now. You can put it on servers, but you're going to keep adding servers,
Right.
and then you have to manually. It's cloud-based, and that price I gave you covers the storage.
Okay.
It covers the equipment plus the storage. But yeah, cloud-based would, I believe, be the way to go today. It's more costly, of course, but a lot less maintenance on our end.
So typically for that kind of information, does it stay available for a certain amount of time and then it just rolls off?
Yes, but we would set the parameters
Right,
for that. By
right.
law, you have to keep it so long, and right now, we have to go in and manually erase stuff, which again is time consuming. So we would probably, with new equipment, you could set time limits that after a certain period of time, it will disappear on its own unless it's tagged.
Right.
So officers can tag if it's a certain type of incident. We have policy that says all that. Certain type of incident needs a tag, and if we suspect an incident occurred that could lead to civil liability, obviously we keep that for 3 years. Those type of things. So you have the flexibility to change that, but your average, you respond to an alarm call that's, just a false alarm, there's nobody there in 30 days, that'll disappear. And that way you can manage your storage.
Mayor, excuse me, back to your question, we'll make sure to coordinate, and I know the chief would, with IT, with you and when he serves, to make sure we've got plenty of capacity or storage space, and it is all cloud-based, like the chief's saying, which is making it much more.
The company's going to provide the storage.
Yeah.
It would be easier, more costly, so it would be much easier for them. Anything else about the cameras?
We're good there. We're good there.
Okay. The last thing I have, a request or a goal for the next fiscal year would be a line item for part-time employees. Presently, to just give you a little background, I won't have my thoughts on this. Presently, we had Sergeant West resigned from the police department earlier this year. Sergeant West he has his own business, so he's going out there, he's doing very well. He was our range officer, so we have kept him on so he can continue to be our range officer, he can continue to qualify us on the range. We try to do some tactical training on the range, those type of things, which are very important. If we were not to have Sergeant West doing that, we would have to give up our range program, which means we would have to go and let the sheriff's office manage our range, qualify all the people, which would take away from us being able to customize training and those type of things. We have another individual, Detective Gonzalez. We are sending him to class so that he can also be a range officer. It'll take a good year, and we've already started doing this, so it should be another year. But it takes a year to get him through that class, but even then you really need 2 people because always, depending on how many people you have on the firing line, you have to have so many instructors, and then you always really want a safety person anyway, so one instructor is doing the instructing, another person just stands back and makes sure nobody's pointing guns at anybody. And so you really always want 2 people there anyways. But if we were to lose Sergeant West, we would have to give up our range program. Presently also, we have Francine. Many of you might be familiar with Francine. She used to be an admin assistant here years ago before I arrived. She comes in 10 hours a month, and she just helps us with administrative tasks, clearing up some paperwork that's kind of backed up. And then I mentioned already that we're doing that evidence inventory. And we brought somebody from the outside, an expert from the outside, to help us with that. Evidence being as important as it is, it gives us that objectivity, someone else rather than, just the chief saying, yeah, everything looks good here. We don't want anybody to know about this missing stuff. You got somebody from the outside to come in and make sure things are done right and done well. And, that's what this person does full time, is evidence is custodian. So we've been paying those people on a part-time basis, and we've been using the salaries we're not paying, basically because of all the shortages to pay them. So at some point in time, we're going to run into a situation where all our positions are filled, and I really look forward to that day, and I think that's going to be very helpful to us. But then we won't have a means of paying those people for whether it be a consulting fee, whether we bring a specialist in to do some training for us, or whether, in the case of Sergeant West, he's continuing to do our range training. And so I was looking for a part-time line item that we can use to pay people on a part-time basis. I think is a means of getting some very significant impact with minimal cost. And going back to our evidence inventory, what I found, and we're in the middle of that, we're in good shape. And what I mean by good shape is I'm not worried about somebody coming in and finding guns and money and drugs missing. I'm not worried about anybody getting indicted over our evidence. It's looking good. The stuff that's coming in is very good. It's packaged well. It's very professional. But what I have found is this here. Chief Sully, who was here, was the chief of police. On top of being the chief of police, he was over the evidence, he was the evidence custodian over the evidence unit. Obviously, being chief was his priority, that was the secondary. Then when he left, Lieutenant Morall, who was the lieutenant over detectives, he was assigned to oversee the evidence function, and his primary responsibility was overseeing detectives and investigations. Evidence became a secondary duty. When Lieutenant Morall left, we put Sergeant Diaz over that, and Sergeant Diaz isn't excited by that. It's not something he wanted to do. He has a very good attitude, and he is doing it, and he's taking care of it. But again, it's his secondary duty, his primary duty is detectives. So what I have found is we're doing very well with the stuff coming in, making sure it's professional, prepared to go to court, and it looks good. So I'm not worried about things missing or things that are going to really get us in trouble. But on the back end, there's a major backlog. For instance, if you were to go to the computer and you were to type in the computer all the evidence we have in the evidence room, there'd be hundreds, if not thousands, of items that the computer says should be back there that is not back there. It's been destroyed. It's been gotten rid of legally and appropriately, but nobody had the time to close the loop and get on the computer and document that that stuff was destroyed. So we have a huge backlog of stuff that the computer says is there that is not there. During our inventory, we came across a very old case. This is just one example. And this is many years ago where things weren't packaged and weren't as nice and as professional as they should have been. And that was probably the biggest thorn or frustration with the inventory I've come across thus far, as we have one big bag of evidence with 20 items dumped in there. We had several of those bags. And so you're trying to make sure nothing's missing, and you're holding this bag up in here. So this one case took us a long time to get through. And the point I want to make is that whole case could have been disposed of. That evidence could have been tossed out and gotten rid of years ago. Nobody had time to do it. So it just sat there, and then I show up and we're wasting our time auditing this evidence that we don't really even need to have back there because nobody has the time to keep up with it. So with this part-time line item, I would be interested in having somebody part-time for 10, 15 hours a week. That can help us clear that out, get that in good shape. And I've been told a full-time person could do that, but I think on a part-time basis, we could really get ahead of that, get caught up. I think it's very cost-effective because you got no benefits, no equipment, maybe a polo shirt. So really no uniforms, no cars, no guns, no weapons. I think you're just paying them on a part-time basis, and we get somebody good to help us clean that up. So that would be really the only other thing outside the body worn cameras that I would be requesting for the upcoming fiscal year.
What would be the estimated cost for that part-time?
Well, $25,000 I think would cover all of our part-time people. And to be honest, as I did the math, what we paid Sergeant West this year for range duties, what we paid Francine, and then my idea for this evidence person, actually $20,000 is probably sufficient. Just thinking of if something comes up like our evidence inventory, or we need to reach out to a consultant, or we're going to bring somebody in, to do some super duper training or something. That extra $5,000 is really cushion. But I think for what I want to do, 20 is probably would get them paid.
Any other questions for Chief?
You started out talking about that safe light thing. Is that like the mental health aspect of
The lethality assessment program is specific for domestic violence. So we go on a domestic violence call, husband and wife are having whether an argument or maybe it becomes violent. And so we have a checkoff sheet. We do a quick interview of the victim. Typically it's the wife in most cases, but we would do a quick go through that checkoff sheet. If they score a certain score so high, that means they're at a higher risk. And this is all based on research and statistics. Right. And then we would call Safe Light immediately and try to hook them up with Safe Light, 3 o'clock in the morning.
And how are they doing so far in responding in a reasonable time frame with Safe Light?
Well, that hasn't rolled out yet. We've just been doing the training because of the holdup with the Maryland.
Okay.
So yes, we've been doing the training. We've sent our trainers off to be trained, and we've continued to meet and try to iron it out. But we haven't actually started doing it yet.
Without Safe Light, in the past, what have you typically done to separate the people and stuff?
Well, you can always reach out to Safe Light. This is just, I think our guys do a very good job. This is just a more formal way of doing it to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. We could always call this a shelter. anytime, day or night. We call Safe Flight anytime, day or night. We try to get them other places to stay. Sometimes you'll have people that just refuse to leave. Now, if there's somebody who can be arrested, that's easy. But sometimes you just have this disagreement, you can't prove that a crime has been committed or there was any violence, and both parties just refuse to leave. There's nothing to do about that. And they just stay there. But I know recently, just to talk about one of our employees, not very long ago, it's been within this last calendar year, he actually put somebody with his own money on a bus. She wanted to get away from her abuser, and he paid to get her on the bus and get her out of town. And he refused any type of restitution. I tried to, get him paid back for that, and he refused that. He chose to do that himself to help her. And so, if we identify the risk, I mean, that's the hard part of the job, is reading people right and really identifying the risk, which is what this checklist is supposed to do for us, help us really identify that risk. Our guys are very good to, try to help protect people, but again, there's no guarantee, it's not 100%.
Just out of curiosity, how is Safe Flight funded?
Well, they do fundraising every year, grants, lots of grants.
Their thrift store is amazing.
Yes.
They have got the nicest stuff in there.
They do a lot of fundraising. I was actually, the mayor was there, and I spoke at the main fundraising event, I believe it was in November, and they made $500,000 just that one event. One person wrote a check for $100,000. Someone to get to know, I guess.
Yeah, really.
Well, I'm no expert here, but could by chance we see the assessment form at some point? I'm just curious.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll try to, let me write it down, I'll try to email it to you tomorrow.
What was the name, chief, of that Safe Flight assessment?
It's called the LAP, Lethality Assessment Program. Sure, if you Google that, you'll find something.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Lethality?
Lethality?
Lethality, like lethal.
Okay, lethal, okay.
Assessment Program. And yes, I can get that too.
Thanks, Chief. We appreciate all that you do, and I certainly thank that officer that put that individual on the bus. That's above and beyond.
No, I agree with you.
Above and beyond. Do we have any other questions or comments for the Chief? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have Mr. Press.
Thanks, chief.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity I have to come and talk to you a little bit about what Public Works is went through and going through and going to go through for the next little bit of time. Hopefully, it's been y'all. This past year, we asked for several items to receive, and I'll just be honest with you, we've received about half of them, and some of the others, they just keep putting us off and keep putting us off. This past year, we asked for an OBD scanner, and hopefully, we talked to the guy at the first of last week, and he said it should be in sometime at the end of this month. We asked for the toolbox. The toolbox come in pretty quick, but it was damaged, so we had to send it back. Well, the second one came in, it was damaged too, we sent it back. And so the third one, we finally got it and set up. And our air pumps, we ordered those, and one came in, and one's in transit. So, I mean, I've never seen a time where you cannot receive nothing that you.
Yeah, isn't it frustrating? You have the money and you can't get the product?
You can't get it, it's not to be found, I'll get into this a little deeper too, in just a minute. So the only thing left for us was a tire voucher, and it's to be coming soon. They said it'd probably be mid-March before it got here. Through the CIP this year, this fiscal year, we were ordered two trucks were supposed to come in. Okay, I knew what it was going to be like, and so as soon as July rolled around, I started calling, and most of our fleet was Chevrolet, and I called through the state contract and through the sheriff's procurement, the dealers that had the Chevrolet. For the people from Chevrolet told me absolutely not, that they couldn't get nothing, they didn't know what to get, you just need to just watch the locks and see how it comes in. And so then I went to Ford and talked to the guy that was through the state contract. Told him what I wanted. He said, yeah, shouldn't be no problem with that. So he said they placed their order at the 1st of October, and we'll be good. He put me down. All right, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, at about 7:30 that night, I got an email from him, said that Ford had canceled his orders. He didn't have none, didn't know what he was gonna get, and he's so sorry. And so I thought, well, he'll roll without it, so ever since then, I discussed with Mark and Heather about what we can do and how we can try to come up with this. And so we just started shopping, and I called every dealer from Charlotte to Western, as far in state, and they all told me the same thing, that they had orders, where people had ordered cars, or ordered vehicles specifically, and then they had been canceled. They said they didn't know what to do. Well, so I went to the internet and started looking, and went to on a website, and I found one in Franklin, North Carolina. And it was what we wanted. It wasn't what we ordered, but it was close enough to where it'd be better than what we had. So we went through that process. We purchased one, and it was in transit, and it took almost 3 weeks for it to transit to here. So we have it. It's in our shop. It's ready to go. And so we decided after the first year we would go forth and see what else we could find. So I started looking again. And I found 2. One was in Greenville, South Carolina. The other one was in Cleveland, Georgia. And I got to talking to them, and the one in Cleveland, South Carolina, they honored something called the FSA is the federal, I can't remember what it was. No, it was the government. They give us government credit on it. It gives $5,000 off on it. So through the process we've done there, we ordered it. I turned the invoice in today. Should be coming, check tomorrow, and it should be coming up here today. So we will have our vehicle, but it's not been an easy process. I say all that to say this. Whenever we get a new vehicle, one of the first things we do is we equip it with everything we put on. And all of our trucks have an upbed insert that we put in, because that's what we use. And we was looking at this time as putting an upbed insert with a Tommy gate on it. What a Tommy gate is, it drops all the way down to the ground. And when we go out and pick up pipe lids, especially these washing machines that come around, they're loaded with concrete at the bottom of them because they spin so fast to keep it from moving. They're killers, so we thought we'd do that. All right, and we had this budgeted through the CIP process before we could do that. All right, so we started contacting out and said, well, we got a truck, what can we do now? How can you help us on this? They said, oh yeah, we can get you one, and the price went up almost 80% from what we first quoted. And they told us it was a 6-month turnaround. And you do the math, this is January. That means we ain't gonna get it full July, so that ain't gonna do that. So for the next coming year's budget, that's something that I'm gonna put in as a decision package, is to put in for equipment to finish these trucks up, which we had budgeted, but with the supply chain demand, we can't get it. It's just not there. So we will start in August or September. Let's try July and see if we can start with those if this is approved before we can equip this truck. Also, just to sound like a broken record, one thing we're looking for this next coming year is a golf cart. There's 3 golf carts here on this here for the town. They've outlived their dream. 2 years ago, I tried to get ours replaced. At that time, it wasn't a good time to do it. So we purchased the stuff to make it nice, and it's just about awesome. And it will make it much fun. And Greg, I was talking to Greg about his. He said he's looking for a golf cart or something of that nature. And a golf cart is as expensive as a beauty. Polaris, what is it called? That's working.
All-terrain,
ATV, all-terrain vehicle. And so a golf cart is nowhere near as good as that. So that's what we like to do is first. We do that a lot. We run up and down 25, picking up litter. We got a sprayer we put in the back of our golf cart. We pushed our golf cart on the trailer to haul it in when it's died before. The batteries on those things are over $1,000 to replace the batteries. And that's what's happened to the chief with his vehicle. Batteries, they'll just sit there and go dead after so long. It's just like anything else that they don't like. But pretty much in a nutshell, that's what I'm looking for. But the last thing I want to talk about is something that I'm sure Marcus touched basically on this. And that was the League of Municipalities came up and done an assessment of our facilities. And told us this is what we need to do to make this place safe. And change this, change that, put this up, put that. Well, this was back in November. And we met with some people that did, and talked to them about, give us quotes on things to do. You know, tell them it's the front reception area. Some of the offices upstairs to where people just can't just walk right in. And I reached out to two vendors. One is the company that done the doors. So we could set up our locks in the same situation as them. Another is a local company here in Nashville that does that would put the bulletproof glass or plexiglass. They don't use glass on it. More of it's bulletproof plexiglass. And I reached out to them since then, and they still have not got me a quote back. And the guy from the local company here about the glass on that part, he said he quoted 20 of these things. On one place there, pictures of them because they were so expensive. So I don't know what to tell you, other than we probably need to go that route. But as far as the dollar road, this time I can't give it to you. I did get a quote on the company to come in and change doors and do some work on that, and it was $15,000 for that part. But they could do that in about a week's work. And purchase the doors.
If I can just briefly comment on that just for a second. At a minimum, we want to get into putting restrictions or barriers in place in the building to get into all the offices. So whether it winds up being bulletproof glass or something less than that, but just a barrier, because right now we're pretty, and we like that, I mean, to be that accessible to the public, but so all the doors, all the entrances to any of the departments to have keypads on there, like you can get in. We keep some of the doors locked, but some of them are open. The front counter administration, you know, putting that built up to the ceiling and doors on the side rather than, at a minimum, getting that. Now, whether we do all the way, we'll assess that and talk to you about it. So.
Yep. Some of the parts will be easy. No, Mark mentioned like there, keypad access. If you've been in the public works building, it'd just be the same thing they had on the inside. It'd be a push bar so people can egress. And a keypad to where you can enter that window and then look like that. But, I don't know, it's just, sometimes it's very frustrating to try to get this stuff. When you know it's there, you just can't get it. And I've reached out to several other agencies that are local here that are going through the same problem. I told one of them I found the truck, and they said, do they got any more? One of the places where I was looking at, I spoke to them about a vehicle that we're looking at purchasing for next year's CIP project, you know, trying to stay ahead and just say, well, how bad is this going to be? He said, oh, it ain't that bad, you know, you'll have a wait period. And he's telling me he's involved with the fire department administrator. He said they had to go somewhere in Georgia to pick up their a vehicle to deal with. And it was just a pickup. And you know, on the sheriff's procurement, Park Ford used to be Brian Easer right in here, so they're a dealer. They're part of that service, they provide that service. But I talked to them, and they said there's nowhere in this world they could promise me anything.
Well, I can tell you how fast cars are selling. Since COVID started, I got a Honda truck and I go over and get it washed every couple of weeks. Since COVID started, there has only been one new vehicle in the Honda showroom since the beginning of COVID. They're all selling before they get there.
My neighbor custom ordered a Pilot, you know, and she had to wait 6 months.
One time there was one of the Ridgeline trucks, but it was only in the showroom once, and then it was gone.
I talked to one of the dealers, and he said, and I was talking to him about this. He said, no, we have this truck. He said, but you need to hurry on. I said, I don't need long. He says, because, excuse me, he said, this can be quick. He says, we're selling for about $2,000 in particular price.
We have any other questions?
The question, same as Parks and Rec, there's an outstanding job, so I'll say that.
Well, thank you.
Keep up the great work.
I do have one question. This came on a resident asked me about the leaf pickup, and I've never heard this before. Did you all ever get any complaints about folk having a bag leaf? They said they wanted, and this seems like an incredible expense to me. They said they probably could got here for the town, and one of those trucks, I guess.
A vacuum.
I believe. Yeah.
A vacuum, yes. Yes, we've looked into it. We looked into it a couple times. And it would be a good thing.
Yeah.
If, but that's the problem right there, the if. Currently, we take our leaves and we haul them over to a refuse, so 191, across from where the old Carolina Roses used to be. And there they shred them up and compost them and do whatever they do with it, but they recycle them.
It's still case on.
Yes, it's case on. In order for us to do that, most times it's the city of Harrisville, they take them to, over behind Berkeley, one of their spots there, and they do the same thing. They just grind them up and do that way. They have someone come in and shred them, they use them throughout the town for some of the flower beds and stuff. Biltmore State, they do the same thing. They take their leaves, pile them up there and shred them out. The way it is right now, if we haul our leaves and we get loaded up and take them to a bird case on off 191, it's about a 45-minute trip, time you back in there. And most of the time, most of these things are operated with a tractor and trailer, a farm utility tractor, where you pull in there and somebody runs the chute, it packs it in there. And the hard part is getting rid of it. That would be fine, but it just don't work for us.
Yeah, I understand.
And then too, people blow them into the ditches, and when it rains, it stops up the catch basins, and then roof is stormwater, people, they get all upset. So we've looked into it, but it's just not productive at this time. If we had somewhere we could dump them, right here, sure.
Yeah.
Because it'd probably be a lot easier to ration some of these bags when they've been wet, please, you know, because I'm taking it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do we have any other questions?
Put a lot in the quarry over there to close down.
There you go.
Looking for something to do with Fairport.
Thanks for all that you do.
No, it's our pleasure, we just enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, General.
All right, next we have Mr. Roofer, planning and zoning.
Follow Jeff every year, twice a year, we're right after Jeff, is that fair?
We'll have to rearrange this next year. Sorry, I'll have you around, yeah.
As usual, I don't anticipate any real major change coming up with day-to-day operational stuff in regard to my budget. We're monitoring the budget, like the stormwater program Joe just lovingly referred to. May even see a slight decrease in that. I'm just kind of looking at fine tuning, working with McGill and Land the Sky on the various components of that. It's one of those things, we're not going to know how we're doing with the program in the eyes of the state until the next audit, which is several years out. We have to do an annual self-assessment starting, it'll be due, my first one under this new permit cycle will be due at the end of February. You basically send in a self-assessment, it's going to disappear into a big black hole because you're not going to get any feedback about it. So come audit time in 4 or 5 years, then the town will get a better picture. Likely Jadwin and I may not be around by that point. So we're just trying to get this program stable and anchored so that it can continue on past our time here with our successors, whoever that may be. So
Yeah, we would anticipate that we would get fined if we find something wrong in audit, they haven't communicated.
it's hard to say. I mean, you got state program people that have turned over. I mean, we have no idea where the EPA is at. It's just the frustrating. You just don't think generally. You just kind of stand under this veiled general threat of fines. I mean, Jadwin had experience with OSHA. We don't have any real basis of comparison to know if it's like as serious as that or not. But that's what we're kind of under right now. We are working. We're doing a lot more than we ever did, especially now that we've got the help from McGill and Land the Sky. So we're just kind of monitoring that. We've built some cushion into the budget the last few years, not knowing the ins and outs of it. So we may be able to bring it down a little bit this year, but then it may ramp back up again. We'll just be constantly monitoring only thing new that may come up, and I don't know exactly when we're gonna know, certainly before, hopefully before the March budget workshop with you. We have applied, Tristan Winkler, the head of the NPO, let us know right around the holidays about a grant opportunity that's sort of multi-layered. The big, huge federal infrastructure bill that came about, there was some new program under that called Reconnecting Communities, which he called me up one day and said, your Cane Creek Greenway extension might be a good candidate for funding under this Reconnecting Communities grant. That would actually potentially be grant funding that would get an actual trail extension funded and built. Now, as is always the case with some of these federal programs, he said you would first want to apply for a planning grant because there's got to be a better, a more specified plan. I know it's been looked at in the, the bike ped plan, which kind of captured all the priorities. This would be a little bit closer, not the full engineered design of it, but a closer look. I would say hypothetically McGill would do for us, but it'll be a competitive selection process if we're selected, so I'm sure McGill would submit for it and we consider who to award the project to. But absent, a staff engineer, we had McGill draw up the potential costs for what it would do to create the plan for that greenway extension, and we're talking from the end of the trail, like kind of right around the front of the park, where there's that at-grade crossing on the Fernleaf. The trail we've been talking about the last few years, which would continue on Fernleaf, hopefully get under 25, the railroad tracks onto Charlie Owen property and subsequently our Meritor property. Potentially planned, though, to go all the way to the river, one way or another, where, county, Hendersonville, they've got ideas in motion for trails coming up French Broad River. So Tristan says that it would be a much more competitive application under Reconnecting Communities if it was planned to the river. So it would link up with these other regional trails that are ultimately in development. So McGill gave me a budget number of about $70,000. It would be the cost for that plan. Would be requiring a 20% match to it. So 20% of $70,000 if we're awarded that. So if that happens, we first come to you for a resolution of support if you're willing to commit to the match. I don't know when this would sync up with the budget process, but it would likely time fairly well. So there'd be nothing that says you would have to pass a resolution of support. We just simply say, never mind, send the funds to someone else. But there was a quick deadline with the application to the MPO, call for projects. So we got that in, and they said that if you get awarded it, you can get with your council later and seek that resolution of support. So that's the only strange outlying dollar figure for my budget that may be talked about, and that's whether it's under my budget or some other general grant line item under another department's budget. Mark and I would flesh that out and talk to you about where it needs to go.
Now, I've given you all a little bit of background about Eric pursuing that planning.
So we would kind of pay for this medium level plan, and then if it came to fruition, then we would have to get with either Mills River or the county to help fund their end of it.
Well, no, we would, the plan needs to be, such that, it would potentially make the actual grant under Reconnecting Communities more favorable. Now, we could choose to just say, hey, we're going to just apply for Reconnecting Communities money to build the trail to get just to the edge of our jurisdiction, it's some weird, and that would be one thing that McGill or whoever was doing the plan will have to look at some actual, considerations on where it best lie. I mean, there's Ben and Kathy, talked to me about some ideas that I hadn't even considered, like, wondering if the Westfeld property would be in the mix, but just some very, off-the-wall things, and, that he's heard different things about different trails, so it's like, there's one scenario where it could go into the Taproot area, which is not our jurisdiction. That developer only committed to greenway easement along the French Rock River, not the Cane Creek. So it's, in theory, if you got it under the interstate, then you potentially have to cross Cane Creek with a pedestrian trail onto Broadmoor property. And Conserving Carolina, who we frequently work with, is actively working with the airport and Broadmoor folks on a potential like stream rehabilitation project, and it might be able to fold in like a greenway along that. So
I tell you, I've played over there twice a week for years, and I don't see any possible way that you could put a greenway across. I mean, there's just not room between the holes in the creek.
it may not be, and that may be something, you know, I just know that we're pursuing a greenway and have been for years to get over to our Meritor property. I'm just looking for the easiest way to get the town as much funding to do it as possible. Even if then later we say we planted the river and then we'd be able to share that with whoever that can continue it forward, but we just then apply for greenway money for reconnecting communities to just get, say, you know, call it, we're gonna do phase 1 of that greenway extension. So, from what I understand, we would potentially not be committing this funding for this planning grant till summer, and then it's a question of would we even have time to apply for reconnecting communities money in 2023, more likely 2024. So this is, again, you start playing that game with federal dollars and, you know, it may be pushed out over a few budget cycles. So right now, it's just a matter of, Tristan says that to go for that reconnected communities money, you need the better fleshed out plan for it. So that's where we're at. And that's really the only other hypothetical dollar figure that's missing from this year's budget that it would potentially be next year's. So, and I'll let you know in March if I've forgotten anything.
Is there someone who's trying to keep an open line of communications with the developer of the Taproot property to see if, because, I mean, they're not going to be able to build anything right along the creek anywhere.
Yeah, and that's something that as we go forward, let's just say we get this planning grant, you know, whoever winds up, whether it's McGill or something, I mean, they're going to be looking at the options for trail locations. So in my mind, that would be a good time then to reach out. I mean, I don't know their arrangement. I know Ken Jackson, who's doing one of the developments on Rutledge Road. You know, I know him well enough to pick up the phone and call him when the time comes. We had asked Rebecca Robinson at the Land Conservancy, geez, a year or two ago to check into that, and never did hear much, but only recently in conversations with Rebecca that and actually this was more for, I forgot which party I was talking to that said that no, it turned out they only reserved an area along the river because they weren't thinking about our potential trail.
I don't think the county is taking the lead on that, Eric, since that's an unincorporated part of Henderson County, you know, as far as their efforts for the whole greenway development in the region.
I mean, we mentioned it, like, I vaguely remember mentioning it to Autumn or Jen at some point when that was under discussion, and there might have been a mention of trying for it, but I never did hear more about it. I mean, obviously, you know, looking at this with Fletcher blinders on, you know, ideally, we're looking at just getting a trail across Highway 25 and the railroad tracks to kind of link up the two sides of town. It'd be a dream to get it connected to a regional system, but, you know, my Fletcher blinders is like looking out for just, you know, expanding our footprint and, you know, creating that use for the Meritor property, at least just to get a foothold in it at some point, not knowing fully what the future holds for that property. So yeah, but if we got that planning grant, there'd probably be a lot more conversation with other parties about where it would hypothetically link up to a regional system.
I think it's very important that we keep pushing to link up to that regional system, because once that gets built, if we're not a part of it, we're going to be in sad shape. It's going to be a very popular.
Pieces are in place. Again, during the interstate widening, you'll remember they were supposedly designing the interstate redo in a way where you can get it under there.
Right.
Then it's just a matter of like it stopping dead, and then either has to then continue on the Taproot on down or come far tester and bridge similar to like we have, and I've never been down to that to know what the topography is like, to know if it's even doable, but you say you've seen it playing golf, so.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's one hole that the creek right now goes within 10 feet of green. And if they have, you know, another heavy flood that washes things out, they could actually lose part of the green. So there's just not any extra space to put a greenway in.
I know nothing about the layout of the golf course. I do know what some of the longer range plans the airport has with, and we've all heard about a hotel conference center around that property, and I've heard that there's possibility of having to relocate some parts of the course. So I don't know if that would factor in or not.
The latest we've heard is they're not going to relocate any of the holes. They'll lose that one practice green that's kind of behind the clubhouse, and they'll build a lot of stuff in there. And
I'm probably not far from. You never know with developers, like you hear from them with lots of questions. And months go by, and then all of a sudden it's an emergency where they want their permit tomorrow. So I wouldn't be surprised for site plan to start coming my way on there. So be able to share more with y'all on what they're doing.
well, they were out doing core samples and stuff a couple months ago, and I think they're hoping to start breaking ground sometime in late spring.
Well, I've heard with permitting, and that's ambitious, given they're not submitted it.
But they are, from what I've seen, they are fully committed to keeping the golf course open.
We have any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move on to accomplishments and overall revenues and executive.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. In the interest of time, I'm going to try and be brief since we're going to try and break for dinner and then resume at being at 6. We've essentially hit all of our goals as stated in the budget for the current fiscal year. The one thing, and obviously it's a disappointment, but about a year ago this time we executed our agreement with the developer for the town center project, and that was terminated, as you know, in October due to the transportation improvements. We're working through the transportation improvement, TIA, Transportation Improvement Analysis, or TIA, to complete that with a consultant, hopefully get that to a reasonable level of mitigation improvements, and with DOT, and then re-engage the developer. Because we'd hoped to be closed, back in April. So that's been our one holdup, but CIP's been implemented. We're kept our services at the same level within what we've anticipated for revenues and reasonable expenses. And the ARP, thank you to being able to move that into salaries and benefits to free that money up. End of this fiscal year, we'll come back to you about a fund balance designation to be restricted for capital projects with those revenues. So that will happen, but we've essentially hit those things as stated in the current budget document, with the exception of our town center agreement not getting a little further along on that due to the circumstances I explained. CIP, we've implemented, and you've heard from departments, most of the items in there, they're all either in progress right now or completed as far as on the cash side of those projects. You've heard about some of the vehicles. We also have budgeted, and hasn't been designed and done yet, but the resurfacing of the trail at Kate's Park, or Kate's and Pete's Park. So we've got that in there. And then the big one, which was kind of an add-on project, was the courts project over at the big park. So we're almost at this final design on that to get that bid. You'll hear a little bit from Ben. I emailed you all the hopefully final design layout for that. But other than that, our debt service side within CIP, we've got 3 projects. It's town hall, financing, the land acquisition over here relative to the town center project, and then the garbage truck financing. So, and those things are all we've been able to do within what we budgeted. That 8.5 cents of our tax rate goes to CIP, 6.5 cents. Debt service side, 2 cents. What the levy produces for projects funded with cash. So we've been able to keep up with that this year. So we'll continue to give you updates on those things that are being implemented, but things are either ordered or under design and getting close to being bid in all these different project areas. And again, on the cash side, it's the 3 police cars and the 2 trucks that Joe had talked to you about, resurfacing of the trail over at Kate's and Pete's Park, and then the basketball, tennis court, pickleball project. We'll be going into year 3 of the CIP, of a 5-year CIP. Revenues wise, just on the 3 largest, and relative to our revenues, our unassigned fund balance is in great shape. From the audit, we're at 5.7 million as an unassigned fund balance, which puts us at 74% as a percentage of our general fund expenditures, which is a really good percentage. Our fund balance policy says to keep it between 45 and 65%. So I'll probably be talking to you soon about some of the excess fund balance. Do you apply some of it to some of the principal or loans, capital projects, some of the other things that our fund balance policy talks about? But we're in excellent shape financially right now. The biggie of our 3 sources in our general fund is property tax revenue. And, we know we've got reval coming up. It's obviously impacts that greatly. Aside from reval, we've had low impact technologies as far as bigger industry coming in, canvas prints, and MTEL. MTEL's the one going in the Manetti building that does the fiber optic cabling. Those things have helped with our tax base on the industrial side. We've got some residential projects that's adding to property tax base. The reval, though, is going to be a big deal this year, and I don't have anything to share with you right now as far as numbers. I did reach out to the tax assessor and have not heard back if she could give us some idea of, a general percentage increase. We typically are on the higher side up here as far as historically in revaluations, that there's been an increase in values because we're in a higher growth area in our proximity, some higher values because of where we're located in Henderson County. So I'm anticipating we'll be in the higher percentage range as a whole for Henderson County, but I don't have any figures yet on that. I think we were in like the 10% range last reval 4 years ago, if I remember right. And we haven't increased our rate since that time, and I'll be talking to you about a revenue neutral. We'll have to calculate that and publish what revenue neutral is. And if I can explain another time more how revenue neutral is determined. Our sales tax is on track right now. We're actually above budget. We only have 3 months collected as reported because it's accrued when you go back. Our utility sales tax, which is the 3rd largest source of revenue, we're on target right now, a little bit above budget. So far, we're in good shape, half of the way into the fiscal year here. As far as other projects, big picture things, I mentioned that traffic impact analysis, getting that done, getting to DOT, getting a reasonable set of mitigation improvements, and then re-engaging, hopefully, the Waddells and the real estate group. The list of the capital projects with our fund balance that will free up with the ARP monies. And then lastly, and I know it's on the agenda, but renegotiating if that's the direction we move in, our contract with curbside management for recycling services. So those are some of the bigger things heading into this budget year that we're looking at. And that's all I have for comments.
All right.
Questions or?
Well, I was just gonna ask that if we do have questions, do you all mind to hold them just until we come back from recess, just for the sake of time, so everybody has a chance to eat?
If you have a quick one, I'll answer it, or maybe a comment, or.
The only thing I had is if there's some way we could set up a system of some of this excess money we have so that things that we know we're gonna need, like Jabos, pickup trucks and stuff, try to get them ordered earlier in the cycle, even though, you know, in other words, start looking now for something that you expect to need bad next year, and maybe by the time next year gets here, you'll have it.
Yeah.
So, some would start ordering some of these things
The
with more lead time.
We're starting, we keep starting earlier and earlier, like as soon as the clock strikes, you know, July 1st, you know, we're letting the department heads know, order these things, start working on it and getting bids on stuff now, because you're gonna get jammed up later, maybe. So beyond that, I guess we could start getting quotes earlier for the following year, but we can't order it because the monies aren't appropriated yet. So
And maybe
that's
we
the
should,
dilemma.
like in this year, start planning more for what's gonna break down next year. In other words, if you think you're gonna have a skag mower you're gonna need next year, maybe we should put it in this year's budget,
Yeah.
so we can start the process earlier.
Okay, do we have a motion to recess until 6 p.m.?
So moved.